What is Open BIM, and how does it differ from traditional BIM approaches used in the AEC industry?
Most people's idea is 3D modeling, to be honest with you. BIM was always an enhanced version of CAD, where you're not just producing drawings, but now you're attaching some data, with the drawings and conveying information through what is called as quote-unquote BIM model. People think of it as better information management. That's a UK term, I think, because I think I was in a conversation with the UK Ministry of it, folks in the UK Ministry, and they said that's...
Welcome to this episode of the AEC Engineering and Technology Podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping engineering professionals find technology that fits their needs. BIM has transformed how infrastructure projects are designed, built, and managed, but not all BIM is created equal. While traditional BIM is widely used, Open BIM is emerging as a more collaborative, flexible, and sustainable approach to digital project delivery. In this episode, I'm joined by Dr. Mallela, Ph.D. and Senior Vice President and Managing Director at WSP USA. With over 20 years of experience in transportation and digital innovation, Jag will speak about what makes Open BIM different, how it fosters better collaboration, and why it's crucial for driving sustainability in construction. We'll also discuss AI's role in BIM's future and real-world applications in large-scale infrastructure projects. I'm your host, Nick Hine, and this is the AEC Engineering and Technology Podcast. With that, let's jump into today's episode. It's now time for our conversation of the week with Jag. Mallela. Jag, thank you so much for taking the time to join the show, and welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. And I think this conversation is going to take a little bit of a different perspective, which is exciting. More, I think, on a discussion about client needs and a national practice that Jag's got in store for us. So we're gonna jump right into it. So Jag, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your career journey, and what led you to your current role as Senior Vice President and Managing Director at WSP USA?
Yeah, I think very briefly, I had spent a lot of years in academia, I should say, spent a lot of time in the research field initially, and my training was in actually materials engineering, and structural design of roadways. And actually that trained me a little bit. I have to say the circumstance into looking at things that need to be solved, that can be solved, harder problems, better ways to solving an existing problem, whether it's an innovative. Initially, I was involved with developing for my Ph.D., for example, a device to test asphalt at low cost, that gives about the same accuracy or, for at least some of the parameters as, let's say, a lab device would, which are more expensive and more rigorous. But that innovative thinking, was always something that I was impatient for. I shouldn't take too much credit for any of that stuff. It's just my training, I should say, is basically maybe too many years in academia. And then I joined a company where, we researched and published eventually. I was part of a team that developed a new standard for roadway design, road pavement design in the United States. It was a large team. I was just a member of that. But that standard replaced a 50-year-old standard, 40 or 50-year-old standard that was in existence that's used across the U.S. So again, something innovative, something new, something that applies concepts that exist, and applied to solving, the problem of pavement design using a new lens, using the best available means and methods. And that kind of curiosity, I think, built on, so I kind of gradually moved on just from the focus of my engineering training, from pavement design and materials to more innovative things, to solve bigger problems in transportation, whether it is a work zone issue or whether it is building bridges faster. I was lucky in that sense to be involved with several innovation programs at the national level, working for the Federal Highway Administration called Everyday Counts, where there was a plethora of innovations. They push out every 2 years, about 8 to 10 innovations that are essentially broadcast to the whole community in the U.S. to adopt, things that have been proven but not widely in use. So that kind of really opened up my horizons, looking at innovation, in general. So that kind of led to me focusing on strategic innovation practice, incubating innovations, looking at emerging client needs, and looking at the policy aspects of it, the engineering aspects of it, the technical aspects of it, and advising clients on how best to embrace those kinds of innovations, whether it's autonomous vehicles, whether it is newer materials. And now, BIM was part of that, building information modeling. So, and the digitalization, all of those are innovative practices. And that's how I got a start, initially with that research groundedness, but eventually expanded to pan transportation and also, frankly, any other sector, energy and environment, where similar things are also happening. It just draws me. So that brings me to my current position, which is a managing director of digital consulting practice and strategic innovation practice, where we help clients, look at what's emerging over the next 5 years or so, and help them, position themselves better through better planning for what's coming up, whether it's a technology side or a process innovation or a materials innovation. So it's very broad scoped, and I'm very fortunate to be where I am. So that's kind of my background. So I think it excites me, to do something new, and I'm a little impatient for doing things new every day. So maybe that's part of the drive. So thank you.
Jagat, and your stories, it was really nicely put, because sounds like a solid background in academia that took you down a career path that's, this is just innovation in general. You never really know where it's going to lead, because it's not entirely deterministic, because you just don't know what's coming next. And that's always been the exciting part for me, and I'm sure you can relate.
Yes, totally. You're 100% right.
And Jag, you mentioned BIM, and that's going to be a focus of this discussion, and I'll start with my next question. So what is Open BIM, and how does it differ from traditional BIM approaches used in the AEC industry?
Yeah, this is a very good question. So when I first started thinking about BIM, most people's ideas, were around, 3D modeling, to be honest with you. BIM was always an enhanced version of CAD, where you're not just producing drawings, but now you're attaching some data, with the drawings and conveying information through what is called as quote unquote BIM model. Yeah. And, all of that got busted very quickly for me, because luckily, again, as part of this innovative work that I've been doing at the national level, particularly with the Federal Highway Administration, I was involved in research, that looked at BIM, known as building information modeling widely, but I very quickly got introduced to the concept that people think of it as better information management. That's a UK term, I think, because I think I was in a conversation with the UK Ministry of it, folks in the UK Ministry, and they said that that's how they think of it. I think it's now a widely prevalent synonym for, what BIM was. And built on top of that, BIM, it's essentially attaching, not just conveying geometry through a drawing or even a digital model, but also conveying information associated with the geometry, objectifying the things that you put into a drawing and actually attaching information to them, right? That's essentially how we understand BIM. But again, very siloed into the design phase. But over time, it is about conveying that information to the construction side so they can build it, so somebody else can receive and actually make use of this information. And eventually, from there, we talk about conveying that information to the operations and maintenance space for strategic asset management, or, just operations or maintenance work. So BIM has found this wider connotation. And within that, then I was introduced through dialogue with leaders internationally and nationally, that there is something called Open BIM. And I think we have to give credit to an organization I follow, and WSP is a member of, which is Building Smart International, and also the chapters across the globe. They kind of coined the Open BIM concept, because it is about a philosophy in the way I understand it, and also articulated it in the National Strategic Roadmap for the US BIM for infrastructure, the infrastructure industry for the highways area. It's essentially a philosophy or an approach for collaborative working in projects that is based on the notion to have interoperability of data between the software applications we use in different phases. So essentially, it's an approach to work. In other words, it is a philosophical approach to work that ensures that interoperability, and the collaborative nature of working. Even if you're not involved in the next phase, you're thinking about that phase and conveying that information to the next phase in the best way possible. That's how Open BIM is. So, and that is done through a set of open standards. And when I say open standards, certainly things that come to mind is open data standards. And the first thing that comes to mind for most people in AEC is the International Foundation classes, which Building Smart has proposed, which is a data interoperability standard. Essentially, it's a format, for conveying that information in a way that it can be opened in any software, right? The IFC data schema allows that, and the data format allows that. But it's more than that. It's also other open data standards. There are many other open data standards that AEC, particularly I'm involved with the horizontal industry, which is railroad, mostly roads. There we have GIS standards as well, and those are also open. And they are part of the story, in my opinion, Open BIM, because they convey information. Information is conveyed from one actor to the next, one phase to the next. Now you're using whatever tools that best convey that information, whether it's a 3D model or a 2D model generated, from design to construction, or whether it is a GIS model that comes back from, let's say, an asset management or an enterprise information repository into the design phase. It is essentially that flow of information. So Open BIM is that. The philosophy supplemented by open standards, data standards, process standards like ISO 19650, data standards such as IFC or OGC's standards, like CTGML. So that's Open BIM. In the traditional BIM world, I think we can still accomplish that interoperability, provided you use a vertically integrated stack of software, or maybe software that's connected to each other through very tight agreements between the software vendors that say my data can be opened in your file because I have an agreement with you. So that is great, but it is, it still promotes model-based workflow, but it is not completely interoperable, as you can imagine, because if you don't have a relationship with someone or you're not in the same suite, you may not be able to receive that information. So to me, it is Open BIM has really is where we need to be. And that's where I think the industry is headed as well.
And I was going to say, it just sounds like the traditional use of BIM, not Open BIM, just provides more friction, even if achieving the same outcomes is possible.
Yeah, I would say friction or even barrier. Barriers. Essentially, it doesn't allow you to accomplish what you would like to accomplish. So as a result, you may have frustration and friction. Yes.
And I think the way you summarize it, Jag, was awesome, because take the designer, for example, even though you're not the one putting work in place, you have an eye on the next person downstream that is hopefully making use of your deliverable to then do their job more efficiently.
Correct. And that is the hard part, I think, in Open BIM, but that's a challenge that many are scaling, because if you can't see, I think why you should do something, then that becomes, something that they may be less inclined to do. Although, that we are turning that corner, because there is a win for everyone. Because what you send to the next person comes back to you if it is managed properly. So your work in the future could be, better. So there's always something in it for you.
And it's like everything in our industry, it's a game of incentives, which is a good lead into this next question for you, Jag. How does Open BIM enhance digital collaboration across engineering disciplines and stakeholders? And what role does it play in improving data governance and long-term asset management?
Well, first of all, I think it, as I said, I think Open BIM facilitates a unified digital language, for infrastructure projects, by aligning the teams around these standardized data structures and exchange protocols. It breaks down the silos. I think I have seen this in action where people, when they receive, I think the biggest benefactor, at least in the linear infrastructure projects that I am, I do a lot of peer exchanges state to state as part of the Federal Highways Everyday Counts effort. And, one of the things that I see every time I go into these digital delivery BIM conversations is, it's heavily influenced by the design stage at this point, because they are the ones that are producing the most data. But the benefactor at the end is always the maintainer, somebody who is actually touching that asset when it's in use, which is 80% of the asset's life cycle. So I wish I had the that data, the pipe's diameter, how far it is buried down the ground, what type of pipe it is. And that comes from the design tool all the way back to me. So when that communication happens and when people see, that, oh, it's useful for my colleague down the line, if this information is correctly encoded, it creates that, to me, that the bridge, if you will, between people. And so that collaborative structure in Open BIM does, open your eyes. Similarly, asset management, there is plenty of work that's happening right now on how data from design and construction, especially as-built data, can beneficiate not just the operations and maintenance of the facility, but future strategic planning. If I know, for example, I've delivered material to a certain spot on the roadway, or I built something, a column with a certain material, and I see that it is either corroding or cracking, more than expected. Now I can track back to, what the source of that material was, what the construction's acceptance parameters were, and try to understand the forensics behind the cause and effect. Can I now dive deeper rather than just looking at it visually and knowing that it is failing? And also, even if you know why it is failing, not having that information hamstrings you a little bit in terms of how you can treat that in the future. So it's kind of strategic planning, for the next round of infrastructure capitalization that you might do in the future. So I feel like certainly that Open BIM allows that collaboration to happen. That information flow itself is, I think it's a great bridge across different departments, but there is burden. I wouldn't say that there is no burden, but I think once you show them how the data is used and how useful it is for the next actor, I think the silos essentially collapse and everybody gets behind. Again, as I said, it is better information management, right? And everybody wants good data. And it's not just a one-way flow. I have to say that I think most people miss the bet is it's the round tripping. Information does come back, right? From, if you maintain it well and you actually encode it with the right information, what did you fix? What material did you use to fix? Where did you fix it? All of that is useful in the future project planning as you think about future capitalization or future maintenance activities. So it cuts down the risk, for the enterprise, and it bridges, the silos. So I feel Open BIM does promote, a lot of these concepts, which are intangible, but, in terms of its ability to bring people to the table. But they're also very tangible because it shows you the power of data. You can actually quantify it in many cases on what value it brings.
And Jag, speaking as an engineer that works completely on the restoration side, and as built are hard to come by. And then if you think about just the life cycle of BIM in the U.S., right? Like it just we have a whole stock of assets that haven't quite gotten to the age where they're maybe starting to see signs where an owner say, hey, maybe I should get this looked at. So you have a whole, maybe less so in the bridge world, but at least in my practice, you have a whole segment that's working on these assets with little to no as-built information, very rarely getting any sort of 3D or BIM type information. And I can think of so many examples where it would be very helpful. And I agree, just seeing and talking to the individuals who are responsible for the life cycle maintenance beyond new design and construction really opens your eyes to like how powerful this data can be when you have it.
Absolutely. And I think it's the same for infrastructure too. We do have as-builts, but what we used to think of as-built, and that's another aspect of Open BIM, right? What we used to think of as-built, is essentially a red line drawing, marking the changes in construction. But now we are thinking of digital as-builts thanks to Open BIM workflows. We're saying it's not just those drawings, which are important from a construction, artifact record standpoint, but we also need the data, is what we are now saying, behind those drawings, like for each of the assets, the priority assets, the top high value assets, to say, and what data do we need? And all of that is now being communicated through what is called as digital as-builting, which is not the same as your as-builting, from the past. So again, that information flow is facilitated through Open BIM. So I think, you hopefully, as this takes on, I think some of the pain that you feel from an engineering perspective is lessened. And I think this is where the greatest value is, is 80% of what we need doesn't need to be what we collect in the O&M phase doesn't need to be collected, I think, in my view, roughly 80%, because you have that somewhere. You had it earlier. This is especially true for buried assets, things that you cannot see. You can collect what you can see, but what about things that you cannot see, which are potentially more useful, right? In the future, think of the subsurface utilities and all the risk they bring to construction projects. So yeah, no, I think that awareness is definitely growing, and Open BIM is helping push that. Maybe ease some of the pain that you were feeling, is essentially to say, hey, there is information flows that need to happen across these silos. Again, coming back to that better information management concept.
Absolutely. And Jag, can you share a real-world example application of Open BIM, particularly in relation to advancing sustainable design and construction?
Yeah, I think rather than an example, let me say that what is happening in the US is a broader recognition that we do need to have key information flows, between the design and construction phase, construction asset management phase, and then in the future, I'm sure we'll talk about coming from asset management and maintenance phase back to the design phase, because I believe, Open BIM allows us to re-architect the way we actually envision projects and execute projects and maintain assets, because it's not the same workflows as in the past. I think it allows us the luxury to reimagine the whole cycle. Just imagine if before you start the design, you knew what assets you had in the project and what their condition was, what the cost was, what work was done on them, and where they are located, perfectly. Very, very rich information you can start, your initial estimates with, and even your conceptual designs with. So I'm just saying that I think there is an ability to reimagine the whole world of AEC. But so to your point about a real world project, I think what we are going through in the United States, especially in the highway infrastructure world, we call it BIM for infrastructure, is we are advancing, the concepts of Open BIM collaboratively. We are building off of what we articulated in the BIM for Infrastructure National Strategic Roadmap, that Federal Highway has published. And we are picking specific information flows that we need to standardize. So how do we code certain information that's useful for the next phase? In that project, which is supported by about 20 plus states across the US, all these states have come together alongside Federal Highways and some of the AASHTO's technical committees to say, let's standardize what the information modeling looks like so we can support information sharing across, key phases of a project and assets lifecycle. And they have picked some areas. This initiative I'm talking about is the BIM for Infrastructure Transportation Pool Fund Study, TPF-5480, where states are now looking at two major data exchanges. Okay, so this one is a big story. What they're trying to standardize is how to take data from final design into a construction contract model. Okay, so it's essentially an information package that goes after final design is completed and is thrown over the fence for letting, right? Where a contractor picks it up, understands the need and responds, to that need through their bidding process, and actually looks at how to build that project and understands it, through a standardized set of information. We call it data exchange, right? Or information exchange standard. That is being done. That effort is happening right now. The second data exchange they picked up is the digital as-building, as we discussed earlier. They're also trying to encode for the highway infrastructure what core assets, priority assets, how do we model that information that comes from design and construction to the next phase, which is operations and maintenance phase. What information should be communicated, how should it be standardized and delivered to the next phase. To me, this is exciting in Open BIM, because what this is really doing is it is advancing the standardization of the information modeling in our tools, and then using open standards to communicate that information, like IFC, from one phase to the next phase, so it is completely interoperable. On the back of that, we also have a similar effort going on in bridges. So I talked about the BIM for infrastructure being roadways. There is another pool fund, transportation pool fund study, that has been going on for longer and is much further along. And some amazing work has been done in that project as well. It's called the Transportation Pool Fund Study for BIM for bridges and structures. And in that effort, they've already published standardized information exchange standards for model as the construction contract model as legal to enable digital data exchange between design and construction, model as the legal document, for example. So there is that work going on. So on the basis of these two pooled funds, then there are over a dozen states that are actually practicing digital delivery using Open BIM, principles. Now, some of the lead states in that regard are Pennsylvania DOT and Iowa DOT are actually doing some amazing pilot projects, in that regard. And many other states are catching on to the concepts of using Open BIM data standards and workflows, to advance, Open BIM in infrastructure projects, highways and bridges in the United States. WSP is also working in the same space, not only helping write the guidance for BIM for infrastructure, side on the roadway side, but we are working with agencies now. For example, Caltrans is a great example of a state that we have recently started working with on enabling an Open BIM workflow for the bridges for a bridge under a task order with Caltrans, is Department of Engineering Services, where we have taken an existing bridge model and we are trying to standardize the data delivery, to support that Open BIM workflow. So these are exciting developments in the US, and I am sure in the years to come, you will see a lot of Open BIM projects being done in the US as a result of these pool fund efforts.
And Jag, I have to imagine that with all the benefits, and this is just an innovation principle in general, there comes change, and change can be painful, which again is a good lead into our next topic of discussion here. So what are some of the biggest challenges AEC firms face when shifting to Open BIM, and what steps can they take to successfully integrate it into their workflows that future-proof their digital strategy? Just because we all know if you're making, people change the way they do something, even if it's for the better, there's going to be some pain involved.
I think there's a lot of pain involved. I think it requires patience. It requires perseverance. It requires support, to be honest, from the top, and it requires de-risking from the top management. To say try something new. Go through the the pain stages. There should be some cover for people that are taking that step. The champions that are leading it. But I think, as you pointed out, many of the changes are primarily cultural and operational, to be honest with you. I think it is really, the first thing is that many agencies, many firms are deeply invested in legacy systems and legacy ways of working, right? Moving to an Open BIM environment requires new tooling. There's no doubt about it. Our existing tooling needs to adapt to that data flow, using a standardized method that we're talking about. So it requires investment, not just from the agency perspective, from all their stakeholders as well. So you're asking for an ecosystem to change the way they have done. Yes, they see the promise, but until you go through that first pilot, you really don't know what you're buying, right? So I think I think it's real and it's a genuine concern, right? It's not just about mindsets. Even if you make up your mindset, I think the supporting tooling is not there. So the tools need to adopt as well. So the industry, especially the technology side, needs to come on board and embrace it. And they are, but making it real and practical, I think that is another big challenge. For me, it's about the availability of tooling to do that. The third one is, are our standards completely foolproof? The interoperability standards, the data standards. More than likely, you will find, because they're also new, they're also emerging, that they're not perfect either. So that leads to some frustration that, this may not be working. So it's kind of, so that's the third layer that we add on, and that creates additional resistance. Why are we investing in all of this, that type of stuff? So I think a key to start this is to start small, as most agencies, and I'll give the example of Utah DOT, or for example, PennDOT, or Iowa DOT I mentioned earlier, and several others. They're starting small, essentially with small piloting, and small pilots that don't put a project at risk, a major capital project, for example. Cross-functional training, making sure that everybody is on board and communicating with your internal parties, but more importantly with the external partners, the consulting firms and the contractors, your intent to go, this Open BIM route. I think the more you can do that, the more painless, it will be, and that's what agencies are founding. And investing in champions, I think this is very important. Investing in champions, who understand the technical and strategic value of Open BIM, and that investment needs to be made by top management. So having top management who understands, the value of where we are headed in this open standards world, who understand that this is the future, and taking that understanding to actually invest in people, and their leaders. I think that is key, and giving them support and showing patience, until results come is key, because the benefits, I will tell you, there are other countries in the world that have done it more than us, and it did take them time to get there. But, you can see the numbers. I documented in our global benchmarking program, for example, the value of adopting Open BIM approaches, model-based workflows, open model-based workflows, is significant. Just if you take change orders, I think Norway is one of the lead countries that documented the value, and the percent reduction in change orders has been in double digits in construction. And you can imagine these are capital projects with a double-digit percentage in change order reduction is real dollars, right? There is investment, but there is reward. But I think there is a journey that you have to go through, and that requires training and patience and support, and money, to be honest. So anyway, that's what I've seen with the world over as I converse with people, and that's one thing I am a little also a little worried about. If we have too short of a span, to see benefits, we may not be able to realize the full potential. So.
Jag, I heard a lot of great themes that I think anyone can apply to their practice of innovation, which include, right, building, advocacy for champions, support from management top down, ROI, right, and then I think the big one and probably the most important one is patience.
That's right.
Because this type of change and innovation doesn't happen overnight, and I think that's a common theme that sometimes gets lost sight of, particularly as the pace of change in the industry quickens year after year, and just understanding that things take time, particularly if you think about the lifespan of a large horizontal asset, right? Something that could be serving us for 50, 100 plus years, and making change on that scale isn't easy, and it just requires us all to be patient.
Yep, I agree with you 100%.
And speaking of the pace of change, Jag, here's a topic that everyone is thinking about, which is AI.
Yes.
And you'll, as to the audience, it's a common theme. You'll hear more of it just because that is what we're finding firms of all shapes and sizes are interested in. But Jag, my specific question to you is, how do you see artificial intelligence shaping the future of BIM? And what impact will it have on workflows and project efficiency?
So I think if you just go back to the core of what BIM, let's say BIM conveys, as opposed to a drawing, the intent is data, right? The underpinning is information that is more than just a drawing. Drawings, certainly are also geometric information, but we're talking about non-alphanumeric information that comes in addition with that, right? So data is a core component of what you're trying to communicate, so people can use geometry and data together to understand intent. What is AI's foundation? There are three things that are foundational to AI: is high quality data, technology, certainly the use of technology, and then the use of the confluence of those two, brought together in ways to actually enable analytics, right? So that AI is dependent on data as a principle. So when BIM models and BIM data models are rich in data, AI is simply going to make use of that information to automate more and more things, as long as your data is reliable, right? So I just see the future, to me, AI application in BIM, and it's already happening, is simply either the next step. It is simply the next logical step. How AI will leverage BIM, is simply where the industry will logically evolve to. We don't even need to try to do that. As long as your models are good, AI has the potential to accelerate the value of them in many, many profound ways. And we are seeing that already, Nick. And for example, automating clash detections, generating design alternatives, predicting, future scheduling needs or maybe cost needs on a project basis, optimizing sequencing of construction as a result of those. AI does transform, data-rich models into decision-ready, insights, right? So I think BIM is a data-rich model, and we are simply taking it to the next level. And for example, WSP, in a typical project, there is a day shift where we're actually in the construction and we're building things, and the night shift is in-office work that's looking at what's happening in the field, resolving conflicts, checking information, making sure that the model is up to date and ready to go the next day. We have a tool in-house, and we have appropriately called it night shift, right? So I think basically the night shift tool is nothing but the use of AI to essentially automate a lot of our tasks, that enhance model quality, right? It boosts our productivity. It improves. It actually reduces risk, and it basically helps us, our engineers have a better quality of life, as some of our night shift creators have told us. Essentially they automate all the routine tasks that are done with a lot of manual intervention, and AI helps us. Agentic AI especially helps us automate many of those tasks. And Night Shift is our in-house developed automation platform engineered to handle large-scale models, to essentially do the mundane tasks of checking, drawings and models overnight in the background, using AI. And we are doing that mainly because we feel like, it definitely helps us intelligently prioritize and optimize our workflows and frees up our teams to focus on high value and creative tasks during the day. So, I'm sure there is a lot of innovation happening around the world using AI, but I think it's, AI and BIM are made for each other.
And one, just very simple task that, I think could be very appropriate to this discussion is, for example, if you're nearing the end of the day shift and you're gearing up for another pour and you have, reinforcement placement on a deck, for example. In high-rise construction, this technology is out there. I'm sure there's something similar in the bridge world, but there are artificial intelligence systems that look for clashes and conflicts, right? Do you have your sleeves in the correct places? Is the bar placement correct? Maybe a little bit tougher on that last one, but the idea is, that rapid determination of data and information guided by experienced humans, of course, I think really has a lot of promise in this type of application.
And we have, like I said, our tool, our night shift tool, for example, also does, I think you're 100% right in terms of clash detection, but we also automate several repetitive processes, Nick. For example, drawing audits, CAD standards compliance checks, BIM standards compliance checks in the future, data extraction, batch plotting, optimizations, generative designs, and things of that nature. And this is done thousands of files, right, per run. And I think what we are seeing is a result of AI combined with high quality AI checks, and agentic AI combined with BIM or even CAD standards, reduces our production time by 50 to 80%. This is manual stuff, right? And, that we used to do, but it does free up our engineers. In fact, I think as somebody said, one of our developers on this, the core developer said, it's not just about productivity. It's about the quality of life for our engineers who are trained, for something else, bigger tasks than just, the routine task that the computer can handle. So I think, again, I can't say this enough that, BIM is meant to give us data-rich models, and AI is meant to work on those data-rich models, high quality. I have to say that is important, that we have good quality data in the BIM models. As long as you're assured of that, Or even if you don't have it, you have standards that you can check against and do like things like you said, like clash detection, but many other mundane tasks as well. So I think we are seeing great value as AEC, in this.
And Jag, on the O&M side, I'm very excited as for the proliferation of computer vision models, because I don't think anyone likes counting cracks and spalls, and that's right. It's just same idea, repetitive tasks, just in the field instead of the office. So we're very excited for what the future holds.
Change detection, and automatic work ordering, and we are seeing all of that as well. On the LiDAR side, we have used machine language and AI models. I think I couldn't agree more with you. I think on all sides, I think AI is here to stay, and it is here to help us make better decisions. I'd rather spend my time, as you said, instead of counting cracks, understanding what's changing and what type of crack pattern it is, and then tying it back to understanding the cause and effect, so I can better engineer my materials and designs so that we can prevent this in the future.
Absolutely. And Jag, that leads us into our last question for the day, which is, what final piece of advice can you give to AEC professionals regarding embracing Open BIM and digital innovation to drive better project outcomes?
One thing, I think the two words, I think one thing is, don't wait for perfection. I think we'll not find that for a while in the Open BIM world. I think because, as I said, tools are evolving, even standards are evolving, right? And technology is adapting to that, and people are changing. But I think starting small and iterating to something that you can be comfortable with and where you can find value, is maybe, I would say, is the best way to start the transformation process. It's not a single event, it's a continuous process. And the rewards of experimentation learning will be there, provided you show patience. That's my second word, which is, have an outcome, but maybe show a little patience because of the nascent place where we are, and trust that the rewards will come, but picking the right areas and right outcomes of what you're looking for with Open BIM is as important as actually doing something, right? So I think we need to be mindfully picking what we want to accomplish and be at it, through iteration and experimentation. So I think embracing Open BIM as a pathway to smarter collaboration is a greater goal, but I think we do need wins, and we do need to pick areas where we want to see value, and then trust that the method will get us there, with a little bit of patience, but approach that method maybe a little bit more iteratively and through experimentation, small steps at a time. And to be honest, this is not magic. This is not a secret. Many BIM mature agencies across the world and also in the United States are trying that method. And I think they will be rewarded, and they have been, for being persistent.
And that's a great summary, Jag. And, what I heard was persistence, patience, small wins, which I think we all can understand. Those small wins are what give us, kind of more runway to do more experimentation, more R&D, and then move on to bigger and bigger wins. So really well said. And Jag, thank you again so much for taking the time to join us today. If the audience has questions about your work or anything we've discussed today in general, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
They can email me. I think you have my email, I believe. I'll also share my phone number, although less and less people seem to be calling people anymore. But certainly, either way, they can reach out to me. But it has been a pleasure talking about a topic that I am really passionate about. And I spent many years studying and even understanding. Every day I come away with a new understanding. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're really glad to have you on. And Jag, thank you again so much for taking the time. Please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at aectechpodcast.com. There, you will find a summary of key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all of your engineering and technology endeavors. Thank you.